Hey everyone, it's Larielie, alcoholic located in Statesboro, Georgia. How you guys doing tonight? I had no idea I was going to be doing this, so I will probably tell this out of order and forget lots of important things and go back later and somehow want to do this again later. But anyway, I'm just going to consider this a rough draft. I had parents who got divorced when I was around 7 or 8 years old. I think after that I started having two versions of the truth in my heart at any one time. There was mom's version of events, there was dad's version of events, and I wanted to love them both equally. That was really important to me. And that meant believing both of them. So something that kind of stuck with me at the very beginning was there's not just one version of the truth. There are many different ways to look at things. All or none of those may be true depending on your perspective. My mom drank a good bit, and she would go on weird dates with weird dudes, always trying to find the right guy. She never did. She found a lot of assholes, but I remember growing up watching how the drink would change her and how she would be giggly around her partner, whoever she was dating at the time, but less tolerant towards me. I remember she even flicked me off when I was a kid, and she didn't remember it the next day. The other side of the coin was my dad. He didn't really drink hardly at all. He would go play pool. Excellent pool player, could run the whole table without letting the other guy have a turn. But he finally met someone, and they're still married, and guess what? She's an alcoholic. So my stepmom is a big part of my early drinking. This person had shown me, starting even from the age of 12, what a raging alcoholic looked like. She would go to the store, buy the largest, cheapest, most economical bottle of vodka you could buy. We called that the mother bottle, and then she would fill up lots of satellite bottles or baby bottles and hide them all around the house. They'd be buried in the backyard, they'd be buried in the toilet, they'd be buried in the AC vent. And she would tell my dad she didn't have any, and then my dad would take off to go play pool, and then I would find my stepmom's stash. I was really sneaky. One time I figured out that if I was playing a video game on the computer, I could leave it on the demo setting. So demo setting means that the computer is going to keep making video game noises, but not actually have me playing it. But she would think I was playing it so she could have a swig. And I would tiptoe to the room and watch what she did. I remember one time I did this and she pulled a shampoo bottle filled with vodka out of the tissue box. And I would pour it out and call my dad, and he would come home and yell at her. This just happened over and over and over again until one day I did not pour it out. I poured it into a different bottle, and to account for the missing liquor, I figured, well, I'm going to tell her, hey, I found this and I'm pouring it out, and pour it out in front of her face like I always did. So I knew that if I filled hers back up with water, that nobody would know because I was going to pour it out anyway. So that's what I did. I transferred it to another bottle, and I was probably 13, couldn't have been older than 14. And I waited until everyone went to bed, and then I mixed it with diet cream soda. I kept thinking it wasn't working, so I drank all that I had. It was probably like 6 shots or something, maybe 7. I was drinking by myself after my parents went to bed, and I remember feeling just really, really awesome. I went for a walk by myself, and I lived in Florida. I lived in a really nice part of Florida where there was just lots of trees and brick roads and things, just really nice, no crime. I wasn't scared at all. I remember just being dazzled by the way the moon reflected off of the car windows. It was amazing. I just saw sparkles in the bricks under my feet. I absolutely fell in love with that, and I probably kept chasing it for the rest of my life. I also love weed. I love to hang out with boys who played guitar and had long hair and smoked weed. So I was always chasing that. I should probably go to a few co-attendant anonymous meetings too, because I don't think I've ever been single for longer than 2 weeks since I was about 12. I just always had a boyfriend, sometimes even for a year or two. And then when that didn't work, I would find someone else. I liked to smoke weed with boys and lay around the bed and look around at the room and see the sunlight coming in through the window and just feeling like that warm and cozy sensation. I think I wanted, by the time I was a senior in high school, to have that as part of my persona, that I was showing everybody that you could be a stoner and still be valedictorian. And I did. Everybody knew I smoked weed. Somehow weed was just easier to get than alcohol, I think. So mostly I would take alcohol when I could get it, but I was never able to duplicate the vodka trick. I didn't do as much drinking as I did pot. But in high school, I went from smoking pot on the weekends to, in my senior year, smoking every day. I wanted to show everybody they could take AP classes and calculus classes and get straight A's and still be a stoner. I was somehow trying to prove that. Later, I found out that people, if they saw that I had good grades, they wouldn't worry about me. Of course, I went to college, just kept getting straight A's, and every now and then I would get a B if it was a really hard class. I majored in mathematics. And still to this day have a profound respect for mathematics. I enjoyed the way that it was right or wrong. I thought that it had an intrinsic beauty to it, the way things were right or wrong. It was so different from my parents, right? There's her version and there's his version. But with math, there's no your opinion and my opinion. It's just right or wrong. And that clean cut certainty really sparkled for me. I was beginning to experience the phenomenon of the daily hangover. I was nauseous every fucking day. I was her lady of perpetual nausea. And yeah, I got by. And yeah, I would drink and smoke pot while I studied and usually make the highest grade on the test. But I was slowly starting to get to the point where I couldn't function without it. One of my friends that I studied with pointed it out to me that I wasn't going to be able to stop when I wanted to. I wasn't worried about it. I was young. I was going to live forever. But we fast forward to grad school. I brought a lot of those things to grad school with me. I found a bar called Tim and Terry's, and I just walked there from my apartment. So I had it figured out. I didn't get a DUI. I never did end up getting a DUI. I would just walk to this bar and play my guitar and just stomp the porch all night. The place had like a nice wooden porch where people would get together and beat drums and play like acoustic guitar or the drums or the flute, and people would play chess. And I was making some good money, not great money, but more money than I had ever made being a teacher's assistant there. You know, it was easy to pick up guys. I would say, oh, I teach calculus. See, I'm grading papers over here. You know, I thought that was sexy to bring a stack of calculus papers to the bar and grade them. All kinds of guys would talk to you. And I bought beers for everybody. But shit kept happening. I kept leaving either my keys or my phone or my wallet at the bar. And eventually, you know, I had consequences that were minor, like my skateboard got stolen, my bike got stolen. Probably the biggest consequence was one of the guys I dated and I were both crazy. And we had gotten separated and gotten back together a few times. One night, finally, things came to a head and we were both really drunk and I hit him. Didn't hit him right because I broke my hand. I'm not supposed to do that. And I had never felt such pain. I was screaming and crying and yelling how my hand was broken. They called the cops. When the cops came, the cops looked at him, looked at me, and took me. So I went to jail for 3 nights with my pinky sticking out sideways. That's your boxer's fracture. And that was not even the first time I broke in my hand. I broke my hand on the other side about exactly a year before that, just wrestling around with some guys. You know, I hadn't punched anybody that time, but I was just wrestling or wrestling, whatever you would call it. I was breaking bones left and right. I've gotten 4 boxer's fractures in my life, but none of this was enough to make me stop. I just kept going and going and going. Pot every day, beer every day. And the only time I ever pretended to quit was when I got pregnant with my first daughter. So by that time, I had found the person that I'm still with today. I guess it was good because I met him in a math class and not a bar. He and I are still together, and we had both graduated and gotten our PhDs in mathematics. We'd moved to Georgia together, and I stopped taking my birth control. We got pregnant with our first daughter. I was so drunk, I didn't notice I was pregnant for the first trimester. And I was really worried that the baby would have FAS. And they assured me that there was no test for it. You just had to make do and roll the dice. And they asked me, do you want this baby? And I was like, of course I do. They're like, well, okay then. I was like, but you can't tell me if she has fetal alcohol syndrome or not? They're like, no, we can't. We can't tell you that. You need to just do your best, make your best peace with this. That was on spring break, but once we got back from spring break, back to Georgia where I now live, I went to this place called the Smokehouse. That's where I've gone to the vast majority of my meetings. It is called the Smokehouse because people used to smoke there in the 70s and 80s, I guess. It kept the name, even though they no longer allow smoking inside. Mostly a bunch of good old boys, pickup trucks, I just walked in and sat down and started crying. I was like, I'm pregnant and I don't even know how far along I am yet. It's true, I didn't know. Turns out I was about 12 weeks in when I finally stopped drinking. But I didn't even know that. I don't know how far along I am. I don't know what to do. I can't keep drinking. I have to stop. And my tears, they just built up on this dirty white tile floor. I didn't leave. I couldn't leave. I knew that if I drank, those toxins were going to be mixed with my baby's blood. I thought in some ways, I'm almost like a jailer and that baby is my prisoner. That baby is prisoner inside my own body. If you can't be a perfect mother, can you at least be a compassionate jailer? And those were the words that finally broke the most. And I just kept crying and crying and crying. I did have a healthy baby and she does not have FAS. She's actually fairly advanced for her age. I don't want to brag. I mean, she's reading like 3 grade levels above her grade level, but I'm really lucky, right, that nothing happened. And I didn't drink while I was nursing her, so I stayed sober 2 years. Then I went back out for 2.5 years. Wasn't nursing anymore, so fuck it. That carried on, but eventually my husband got tired of me. I was just always up here in my office drinking and kind of isolating from everyone. I found fun things to do, like I would pick a Radiohead song and pick, another song like a Fleet Foxes song, and I would play them at the same time and like find overlaps and just zone the fuck out, drinking as much beer as I wanted up here. And no one really bothered me about it, but I think it was really wearing on him. Somewhere that last year, I lost my job, not because of drinking, but because of the consolidation at the university. And I was so upset that I started punching my leg over and over and over again. I sat right in this chair, just holding my leg right here, like a keyboard, and just punching it over and over and over. Finally, I had knots on my shins, and I broke my hand again from punching myself. That's how depressed I was. Fast forward a little bit, I decided to go back to grad school, and that going back to grad school again would be better than sitting up here getting drunk punching myself. Right before I went back to grad school, I had a freak out because of COVID. I have a weird heart condition that's not very forgiving sometimes, and I got a note from my heart doctor. Right? I got a note from my doctor saying that when I taught class, I didn't have to be in front of my students. I could teach online. And I was really sitting there looking at this doctor's note, and I'm like, I have this note for my health. This note is for my health. Everybody in the world is like scared of COVID, and I'm claiming a health reason to not meet my students in person, but to meet them online. How crappy is that of me if I'm going to keep drinking? I'm probably going to get sent to the hospital for COVID, and then they're going to have to detox while I'm at the hospital. Now, none of this stuff ever happened, but I could see it really clearly that if I got sent to the hospital, they were going to be detoxing me. And I was scared because you can't bring your beer to the hospital, right? So I detoxed at home on my own terms. I dropped down to a 6-pack a day for the last month I drank. So physically, I didn't really have any symptoms, but I did have a lot of anxiety. I called my doctor, who was well aware of this, and I told him that I said, today's the day, I'm quitting. And he prescribed me some lorazepam that I took very sparingly for about a week. And I didn't actually have to go to like a treatment or anything. The place where I live now, Statesboro, Georgia, that's kind of the treatment capital of the world. Maybe not of the world, but of Georgia, it's the treatment capital. We have treatment houses everywhere. And I know if I'm not careful, that's where I'll end up. But oh my gosh, I left out 5D. Yeah, I started, when I got sober the second time, I started going to online. So that's how I found 5D. And I still go to a mixture of in-person meetings and online meetings. This time around, I was sober for over 1.5 years before I got pregnant. So again, with my first pregnancy, I got pregnant and then I got sober. But this time I got sober and then I got pregnant. It's so much better. And I'm teaching full time still, and I'm teaching mathematics every day, and I love my job. Yeah, I owe it all to 5D. Thank you guys